Welcome, folks, to the 24th episode of No Conference for Old Men, the podcast where three old guys are talking Houston Cougars basketball with a bit of Big 12 coverage added in it as well, and proud members of the GoCoogs.com network, the undisputed number one Houston Cougars content provider. Our Houston Cougars, unfortunately, end their season in the Sweet 16 and end up at 32-5 for the year. A huge achievement, making the Sweet 16 for the fifth straight year, but a heartbreaker in terms of how things ended. We started fast. Duke had a deer in the headlights look to them, and the refs were letting the kids play. But a devastating game-ending ankle injury to Shead at the 6:50 mark in the first half, when we led 16-10, proved pivotal in allowing Duke to eke out a 54-51 win to end the Cougars season. And again, all three of us are back with Tom Lydiak, former coach, Bill Walker, former player, and myself, Steve Chang, analytics guy, for this episode. So we'll begin by summarizing the Duke game and the impact of Shead's injury, forecast how the team looks heading into next season, and what we should really look for in the transfer portal as the gates are already open. Then maybe a brief forecast of how we believe the Final Four will play out to end the podcast. Okay, so let's get into it, guys. We were cruising along versus Duke, and then Shead turns his ankle, making a drive to the hoop at the 6:50 mark of the first half, which completely flipped the game 180 degrees. What are your thoughts after having a bit of time to reflect on the loss and the impact of Shead's injury? Tom, you want to kick us off with your coach's thoughts?
Sure. Not a whole lot to say. You can probably sum up the Duke game in two words, and that's Shead's injury. Steve just mentioned it was like the 6:50 mark. I believe we were up 16-10 when Jamal went down with the injury. And it's funny that when they were showing the replay, I was looking at his left ankle. That thing turned too when, he went up for the shot. But before Shead went out, Duke had a tough time scoring. I mean, almost 13 minutes of game time being played, and Duke had 10 points.
Yep.
And Jamal was, even though I think they said he went like 1 for 5, whatever. You're not just losing a starter. He's consensus All-American. A lot of people, me included, think he's the best point guard in U of H history. And if you look at every squad around the country, you can't compare any squad with losing like a Jamal Shead. I think Kelvin mentioned that it would be like losing 2 All-Americans for other teams, but you just can't, analytics, metrics, whatever, they can't just put a number or whatever. It's hard to put in perspective how much Jamal means because he's also the leader, and that doesn't show up, like in analytics, but he gets other guys' shots. He gets LJ shots. He gets Emmanuel shots. He gets Javier shots, alley-oops and dunks. When he goes out, pretty much it for us as far as trying to score. Having said all that, and then you throw in the injuries to Terrence, and then you throw in the injury to JoJo. Having said all that, we had a chance to tie the game at the end. There's no other team in the country, just like the A&M game. In the A&M game, there was no other team in the country that would have won that game in overtime like we did. And I'll say the same thing about the Duke game. You got to remember, Duke starts, all 5 of their starters are 5 stars coming out of high school.
Yeah.
And you look at that team we had on the floor and how Kelvin was able to keep it to like a one possession game is just incredible. Yeah, it was disappointing that we lost, but it made me damn proud that I'm a University of Houston basketball fan. I think everybody should probably feel the same way. There's certain things you can't control. You can't control officiating, you can't control injuries, and it just sucks that our season was cut short due to some of these injuries. But if you look back and objectively at the season, incredible season. Like you said, Steve, 32-5, made the Sweet 16, I think 5 times in a row, and then came within 3-point shot of tying it up and sending the game versus Duke into overtime. So that's pretty much my thoughts on it. Woke up Saturday very, very, very bummed, but it's life and you move on. But just damn proud of everybody in the program.
Completely agree. How about you, Bill, from a player's perspective?
Well, and I kind of mentioned this to you guys via text earlier. I typically bring up statistics, who played well, who maybe didn't, and virtually every time why we won. Instead, having been at the game, having run into people afterwards, and of course seeing some of the posts and everything, I think this time what I'd prefer to do is just complain.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, we came out and we took advantage of what I said was our advantage, being more physical inside, being more aggressive inside. Roberts and Francis scored 8 immediate points. Shead not only got them the ball, but Shead was so good when he was in there. He dominated McCain. McCain committed 4 turnovers for the game, and Shead was on him, and he committed those 4 turnovers in the first 11 minutes.
Exactly.
You talk about a deer in the headlights. McCain was completely out of the game with Shead taking him apart.
Yep.
It was unbelievable. He was absolutely his dominant self. He was clearly the best player on the floor. And then Roberts picks up his second foul on what was absolutely a flop by Duke. And that kind of hurt the going inside and taking advantage there. And then obviously Shead suffers just a devastating injury after, like you said, playing 13 plus minutes. At that point, obviously everything changed. We lost the Big 12 Player of the Year, the Defensive Player of the Year, and arguably the best leader and teammate ever at U of H, possibly anywhere in the country. And everyone's roles changed at that point.
Yep.
So did Duke's roles. So did their approach to playing defense against us, to focusing much more on Cryer, on Sharp. But after the game, myself, Rob James, who I went to the game with, who managed under Guy V and Pat Foster as a manager on the team and knows basketball really well, Brian Hiskey, who played golf at U of H, and his son, who currently plays golf at U of H, we stayed at the Hyatt where the team played, but we went to the Adolphus Hotel for drinks because there were a lot of U of H players there. And at the bar, Bryant was, for just about 2 minutes, was engaged by someone, and he wanted to get away from this person as quickly as he could. It was a U of H fan. Yeah. So he told the guy, look, I got to go check on my son. He's like, but why don't you talk to Bill Walker? He's like, he'd be happy to talk to you. So having no clue what's going on, I walk over, and the guy just starts in on me about Kelvin's poor coaching.
Oh,
and how
gosh.
He's like, I've watched every game this year. And I'm like, well, that's great. So have I. And he said, Kelvin had his poorest coaching game. He just didn't know what to do. He said that the fact that we lost this game was because Kelvin didn't have the players shooting more threes. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, are you serious?
It's ridiculous.
Are you kidding me? I mean, I probably should be more mad at myself for arguing with this guy for probably close to 40 minutes, at least half an hour. But unfortunately, being the contrarian that I am, being at a bar where we maybe had a few drinks, I fell for his trap and his, quite honestly, his idiotic arguments. I'm still just bewildered how someone who says that he watches every U of H game can be so short-sighted and quite honestly so ignorant. It blew me away. And after about 40 minutes, I finally figured out that I needed to do the same thing that Brian did, and I introduced him to Rob, and then I walked away.
Nice.
There were some people I ran across too on some posts and some social media. Yeah. They were, in their words, they were second guessing Kelvin's quote unquote game plan in the second half and why we weren't doing more to get Sharp open. You know what? Duke's guards, all of them are 5-stars. These guys are great athletes. They're quick. They're intelligent. They can jump. They switched on every screen.
Yep.
there's not a player in the country that could get open against that type of defense, and if they do that stuff with Shead out there, there's no help on Shead's drives, and they can do that with Shead went out there, but it was
going to tear them apart, and that's and I said that during the previous podcast. I said he's going to penetrate, he's going to be able to kick the ball to Cryer or to Sharp, he's going to be able to lay the ball off to Juwan, he's going to be able to put the ball up for Javier to dunk. I mean, everything's changed. It's an entirely different dynamic with Shead out of the game, and it's not like it was something that you prepare for. It happened on the spur of the moment. But I'll tell you.
Hey, Bill, I finally told one guy, I said, okay, here's the deal. Go grab a piece of paper and you draw up an offense that you think would score on Duke's defense. Good grief. And I always come back to that quote. I think Scott Skiles said, basketball's like church. Many attend, but few understand.
Yeah.
The next thing is that I saw several posts criticizing Malik and the team for not wanting it enough.
Really?
And again, the coaching. And then I ended up seeing a post from Malik's mom. She said, look, I never post on Twitter.
I saw that too.
Yeah. People are going after her son, and I'm like, they're going after him? I mean, is he not the same player that was in a game where we lose the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, yet we hold Duke to 54 points?
Yeah.
I mean, secondly, everyone busted their collective asses trying to win.
Yep.
And quite honestly, trying to pick up the slack for Jamal.
Mm-hmm.
Cryer and Sharp spent time running the point when Malik wasn't in. That affects them. We don't have either one coming off of picks, getting set up to receive passes from Shead and hit open or shots because everyone's roles changed. I just can't believe it.
Yeah.
I should qualify this because I've obviously encountered some of the people that are quite honestly bitching and probably feel like they have to complain about something. The overwhelming majority of the U of H fans and U of H supporters, everybody is not like this, and they understand how exceptional the team was, how well everyone played in that game, how well this team is coached. But it was just a few that, I just happened to encounter and that really got on me. And I just don't understand it. And the Malik stuff, how dumb must you be to expect the same level of production at both ends of the court when you lose someone as great a leader, as great a teammate, and as great a point guard as Shead is? For people to think that Malik's going to come in there and perform equally or even close is just so unfair to him because Shead is so damn good. If Shead doesn't get hurt, we win this game by 15 points, and we're all booking our flights to Phoenix. I'm absolutely convinced of that. We lost this game for one reason. We lost as valuable a teammate and as valuable a leader as there is in the country, period.
Here's one more thing I want to add, and I'm done. I saw some posters that were even saying that they hoped Shead would come back in and play in the game. It's like,
which is crazy.
No, hey, you see how he twisted an ankle? They had to go get an X-ray to see if it was broken. There's no way in a game where Shead's whole game is quickness, planting. He won't be able to plant for 5 weeks now. That's the last thing I'll say about that.
Well, quite honestly, we didn't know either. We were sitting about 15 rows behind U of H's bench, and we had no idea until Shead came out for the second half, and then we could see, okay, he's clearly not playing. Sure, it would have been phenomenal, and I understand that based on NC State in 83 and some of the other 1 of 20 from behind the arc against Villanova a couple years ago, it just hasn't fallen our way, and we haven't won a title. And And this was a year where it certainly looked like we could have fulfilled our destiny. But my God, to look for scapegoats and to blame people or coaches for that happening is just, I mean, it's like, come on, be better and try to be more intelligent than that. That's it. The end.
No, I think we're on the same page here. We could not have asked for a better start. Duke turnover to start. Roberts layup. Duke turnover again. Francis layup. Duke misses a three. Francis alley-oop dunk from Shead. Duke timeout. That's how things started. They were shell-shocked. Duke came out of the timeout with yet another turnover. And we came up with almost another dunk by Francis, but still got another offensive rebound and a score by Roberts. It was going like all of us had hoped it would. You get a pretty good sense early on in our games as to whether it's going to be one of these good ones or not, right? Based on the energy level, the crispness with how we come out. And this was one that you could just feel we were going to be putting a hurt on Duke this day. But everything changed on that one severely turned ankle on our consensus first team All-American point guard, Jamal Shead. People need to remember he's first team consensus All-American. We haven't had very many of those, right? Just a handful in our entire history. Nothing was the same for our team after that point, accentuating the lack of depth we had this year from a point guard perspective. The team regrouped and the coaching staff adjusted the best they could at the half. And fans should be proud of how the Cougars kept this game to a one-possession game to the very end against a talented Duke team, as you guys have both highlighted, with a roster that we lost. Arsenault, Tugler, and then Shead during this game. The disappointment for the kids is that the way the game was going and how they were playing, there was no doubt in my mind either that we were winning this game. In fact, it felt like it was headed towards a blowout win for the Cougars. Now, if you look at, the kids, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on analytics, but, Roberts and Cryer did their best to keep us in the game. Roberts ended up with 13 points, 8 rebounds, 1 block, 1 steal, was a player box score plus minus 14.6, while Cryer had 15 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist. But when you take our, whatever you want to call it, head of the snake and leader of the team that spearheads our efforts, both running the offense and checking the opposing team's primary offensive threat, how do you play the game as it completely changes and it is impossible to recover mid-game? And as each of you highlighted as well, for all the fans that did complain and question our offensive play calling in the second half, I don't know what to say either. Duke has a strong coaching staff as well and watched the previous few games. Once Shead was out, they made the call to say, hey, it simplifies everything. We're sticking to Sharp all game long. There's no cheating, no doubling off of him. And he had no breathing room. Even 2 steps back from the three-point line, he had no room. It made Cryer and Roberts try to beat them. And it's easy because Houston has no one left that can break down the D handling the ball. To gut the game out and keep it within a possession all the way till the end while continuing with our tenacious D, it's a tribute to the great coaching from Sampson in the second half. The coaching on both offense and defense this season were exceptional, in my opinion, when you look at it as a whole. Finishing the season, we were 18th in adjusted offensive efficiency and number 2 in adjusted defensive efficiency. From a roster construction perspective, I loved how this team was made up, with Roberts, Francis, Tugler, Arsenault, Walker at the bigs, and Shead, Cryer, Sharp, Wilson, Dunn at the wings. The only thing I did question towards the end of the season at all, actually, I was one of the ones that asked, had we overtaxed the kids with a workload and practices, not leaving enough time for recovery, and not causing the injury, but potentially leading to the injury bug yet again? It's probably 3 or 4 years in a row we've had this. But as Brad Towns, one of our colleagues that had more insight on this, shared on GoCoogs.com, practices and workload schedules and load were actually indeed adjusted coming into our first season with the Big 12 and lightened up in anticipation of the tougher games and the Saturday, Monday game schedules at times in the Big 12, with us being featured on Big Mondays. So just unfortunate injuries. The team did their best throughout the season, and we move on to 24-25. Now, from an advanced analytics perspective, the one thing I did want to highlight for fans, just to illustrate how big a difference it was once Shead went out. For the game, Duke shot a dismal 46.9 effective field goal percentage and 35.5% from three, turned the ball over on 15% of their possessions, all well below their season averages. Their stats before Shead went out, my God, they were shooting at 23.5 effective field goal percentage, 0% from three after taking 8 of them at that point. Turned the ball over on 33% of their possessions. They were being bullied all over the court. On the flip side, even without Shead, we found a way to maintain a similar level of scoring. Our effective field goal percentage was 42.1% before the injury, and we somehow figured a way to maintain 42.9% for the whole game. On turnovers, we went from 15% to 17% on our possessions, but still within striking distance. What we lost was the ability to go on runs of 8 to 10 points in spurts after steals without a true ball handler and distributor, which is a big part of our point production. So now as we look to next season for our Cougars, what do you guys think in terms of the roster makeup? And I know there's still a lot to be determined. We don't know who's staying for sure and who's leaving. But what are you guys expecting or maybe looking for from a portal perspective? Bill, maybe you can kick this one off. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that everyone that is able to come back, for the most part, does. I think Shead's gone.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe equally as devastating, Ryan Alvin's gone. That was a joke. I'm not sure how Said, Malik, and Dunn come back. Maybe one, but I mean, I'm looking at the team for next year, and if nobody gets poached, and that's always a possibility, just like with Tremont, and I guarantee you there's NIL money that schools are probably going to be dangling in front of, especially Sharp and Javier. But let's assume we get everyone back. I'd say we have Emmanuel, we have Jaywan, we have Javier, we have LJ coming back, we have Terrence, Tugler, Ramon. That's 7. Then we have our 2 red shirts from this year, Jacob McFarland, big guy, and Cordelius Jefferson. So we're up to 9. Then we have our 2 freshmen that are coming in, Mercy Miller, the scoring machine from California, Masterpiece son, and Chase McCarty, the 6'5" forward. So now we're at 11. So now it becomes, who do you get? And I was looking at players in the portal, and I think the focus probably is and has to be on point guard.
Agreed.
And looking at some of the point guards that are available, you have Uzan from Oklahoma, who just declared bigger point guard, 6'4". Is he a U of H player? Could be. Mm-hmm. There's some others. Malik Mack is a small point guard from Harvard, 6'1", 170, although he was kind of a scoring machine. There's another player, Zeke Mayo, South Dakota State. He's 6'4". He's also a good scorer. And when you read some of these reports, you don't know how well they're able to play defense. I'll tell you one guy, his name's Ace Baldwin. He was a point guard at Penn State. He's got one more year. He was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. And he's 6'1". He's not as big as Jamal, but he rebounds the ball. He moves the ball. He's a great defender. So at least he's got the numbers that would, and the game that would fit right into Kelvin's system. There are a couple others. Doug McDaniel at Michigan, he moves the ball well. He's ultra quick, but he's 5'11", 175, and not a great defender and certainly not a rebounder. So you would think no to him. Yeah, I mean, those are the guys I'm looking at, I guess, in the portal right now. Those, kind of those half dozen. Uzan would be interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
Baldwin, I think, of all these guys, he's probably the most like Shead.
Okay. How about you, Tom?
Like Bill said, it depends a lot on who stays, who goes, like whether we get poached with a player. Like Bill said, Tremont, that one came out of the blue. I'm not privy to any inside information, but definitely point guard is at the top of our list. I think Jamal is gone. So you're looking at point guard. I don't see a point guard on the roster. I know LJ came here supposedly because he was going to have a chance to run the point a little bit. But for you old heads who are familiar, I compare LJ to Calvin Murphy. Calvin Murphy was a 5'10" guard, but Calvin was not a point guard. He was a 5'10" shooting guard. Matter of fact, when he played for the Rockets, John Lucas played the point at about, I think Lucas was listed at 6'3". I don't know if he was that tall, but Calvin Murphy, played the shooting guard at 5'10". And that's kind of the situation we had this year, with LJ playing the 2, and he's only 6'1". We haven't seen a lot of LJ play point, but I just don't think for a program as elite as ours that he's the answer at point guard. So definitely, I think we're going to be in the portal looking for a point guard. And I'm not sure about Cordell, whether they're going to groom him for a point, whether he's a shooting guard, whether he's a combo. So who knows? Yeah, if Malik doesn't stay, maybe you're looking at 2 point guards.
Yeah,
in the portal. We also got to consider whatever player we pick up in the portal that we might have a player leave. We knew that from Kellen's interview that JVA was going to leave if we went in the portal and we grabbed another big. So you never know how those dominoes are going to fall. And with Jawan and LJ, you just never know. We're not mind readers. We can't jump inside their head and see what they're thinking. And we also don't know what Kelvin is thinking also. Kelvin might have had idea a long time ago about who he wants to stay and who he's going to kind of nudge out the door. But definitely point guard. We're at the point where we don't rebuild, we just reload. And I just can't see handing the keys off to, a freshman.
Yeah, no,
to drive your dad's Lamborghini, and then run it off a cliff, so to speak. So Kelvin's looking at assembling our roster that's going to win a national championship. We had the roster this year to do it. Injuries took care of that. We got a lot of good pieces coming back, and we'll just have to kind of wait and see probably the next couple of weeks. If you're a Major League Baseball fan, they have what's called the Hot Stove League. Once the World Series is over with, and before spring training, you got all the talk about trades and, free agent signings and this and that. And, with the portal now and NIL money, this is kind of like the Hot Stove League. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can get really good, really better in a hurry, but the portal can also be a cautionary tale. Be careful of who you bring in. Eric Musselman in Arkansas.
Yeah.
There's Exhibit A. Bill Self.
Yeah.
He admitted it. He said, I just screwed up on the roster. And Kelvin's a Hall of Famer. He's a really smart guy. So he knows what he's doing. He's not going to screw things up.
Well, keep in mind, U of H has had a lot of players indicate that they wanted to come here, and they've been told no.
Yeah.
It's just not the right culture fit. So it's not a matter of taking someone who may have some good numbers and, whatever. I mean, if someone is a good defensive player, a good rebounder, they're probably a good team player. The guys that do the things that Calvin's looking for, I don't see an Arkansas situation here just because
Agreed.
They're just not going to come here. They're going to be told, thank you, but no thanks. The other thing is Jefferson, it wouldn't be, yes, he hasn't played in a Big 12 game and he hasn't played in a game, but he also practiced against Shead for an entire year and the others. I don't know that I would equate it to handing the Lamborghini over to a child. He's going to be in better shape. Now, I agree. You want experience. And Kelvin, at one point, when he was asked about point guard next year, he kind of half smiled and said, "Don't worry, I've got it covered."
Yeah, he did.
I would have to bet that one of the good point guards is coming in, one of the experienced point guards, but I wouldn't necessarily sleep on Jefferson either. We'll see.
We'll see.
I've heard leader with Cordell.
Yeah. I think I'm more with Tom. I'm not discounting Jefferson. I think he'll be part of the equation. I don't think he becomes your primary point guard next year, especially if,
I don't think that I think he could take over as playing Malik's role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And fill that role very well.
And maybe even better. Yeah, I would agree with that. Our roster looks strong yet again. I actually think we're going to end up with another title-chasing roster, even if Shead leaves. I looked at the roster as well, and obviously, again, we don't know who's going to elect to leave and things like that. But if you look at it, Sharp, KJ Jefferson, Walker returning on the perimeter, Francis, Tugler, Arsenault, Lott, McFarland at the 4-5 spots. Maybe Arsenault becomes part of the wing. We've got 2 freshman perimeter guys, like you said, Mercy Miller and Chase McCarty. Makes it 10 known ones that you expect to have back. The TBDs are Shead, which I agree with you guys. I believe he's leaving. We even saw a tweet today from Sharp where he stated he was bummed out that Shead wouldn't be back next year. Roberts, I'm hoping he's back, but if I'm being truthful, I think he also leaves. Cryer, well, you've been here for 4 or 5 years? 5 years, I think, right? With him, with his redshirt year, he's physically been here 5 years. It's a lot to go through. So I'd love to have him back. Sometimes it's just too much. You just reach a point, you're 21, and it's just time to move on, right? And
if the NIL money is okay, and the one thing about Jawan is that he's had the knee issue the entire year, and maybe further, but definitely the entire year. He's getting it drained constantly, and is somebody, and when I say somebody, I'm referring to overseas, going to offer him a decent longer-term contract? Yeah, I don't know. With the NIL money, coming back to U of H may be the most optimal situation for him. And I think it is.
Yeah, I would hope so. I hope the money is going to be enough to entice him to come back. It's tough to go through a full year. We've heard about the prep and yet another year through it, and it can be tough on these guys. And so we'll see. I'm hoping he's back as he'd be a perfect fit. LJ Cryer, I'm hoping he's back again. There were some posts suggesting that he may be looking at a more offensively oriented opportunity. Malik Wilson, we all know he wants to be back. Dunn, I don't believe he'll be back, but we'll see. But we've got 3 open spots to get to 13. As Pesman had stated, and you just mentioned during his interview, our 3 key seniors have eligibility to come back, and we were working on NIL dollars. So we'll see where that lands. I believe a lot of folks have stepped up on that front, but ultimately it's going to be the kids' decision as to whether it's what they want to do or not. I agree with both of you guys. Point guard is the glaring gap that we have where I believe, again, Shead is gone. We can't wait in the portal, to be honest, so we need to make calls pretty quick. Unfortunately, we did not have the luxury of a freshman or sophomore point guard learning the ropes behind Shead. So I think this is a position that we got to have. It's the greatest need. I do like the kid from South Dakota State, Zeke Mayo, that supposedly had been contacted by us. He's a Lawrence, Kansas kid, though.
He is.
Yeah, and I think he named his finalists and our names off of it, so I don't think that's going to happen. No. Good point guards don't grow on trees, especially ones that would fit our culture. But I think two very recent portal entries, Uzan, as you had mentioned as well, Bill, from OU, 2 years left. I actually love this kid's game. And if we've got any contact and if the coaching staff feels like he's a good fit, boy, he'd be fantastic. There's PJ Haggerty from Tulsa. He's also got 2 years left. We actually recruited him coming out of high school. So I don't know if we still feel like he's a good fit or not. Next would be a dead-eye shooter from the 3 spot with some length. I mean, Terrence Arsenault may become that, but it might be good to get another kid with that skill set for some competition. If we need some scoring low, just in case Roberts decides to call it a career, there's a kid that just entered the portal today, Ezra Osar from East Carolina, would be a nice get. I don't know if you guys remember him, but boy, if we recruited him, it would follow our staff's trend of going after kids they've seen up close. And he ate us up last season. He was a freshman last season, first game against ECU. The kid had 15 points, 8 rebounds. Well, we had some time to prep for him for game 2 in the mirror game. And you know what happened? He came back with 18 points, 19 rebounds. I mean, that is just crazy. So he's still got 2 years left. And so we'll see if there's any interest from the staff. And then an interesting tidbit just before we went live on the podcast on the freshman recruiting front. Liam McNeely, the 5-star who decommitted from IU, just listed us in his top 5 teams recruiting him after he reopened his recruitment, along with KU, UConn, Kentucky, and Michigan.
Steve, there's your 3-man right there that can shoot.
Yeah, if he's interested. So we'll see. So I think, we're going to try to keep tabs on it. None of us have any inside info on any of this stuff. So we'll be combing Twitter and Trilly Donovan and whatnot to see what's going on. And
okay, speaking of Trilly Donovan, who in the hell is this guy? Who? How does he get his information supposedly?
I don't know, but he's the
one who said Terrence Arsenault was thinking about leaving.
Yeah, he said him and Cryer, right? So we'll see. But it was also stated that it was dated information. It was a posting that happened a few months ago. And then a follow-on posting suggested that, Kendrick Perkins had recommended to Arsenault to stick it out at U of H subsequent to that. So we'll see. We'll see. Again, it's all speculation. Weird stuff leaking out left and right these days. So, okay, guys. So finally, I know we don't have much interest in the tourney after our Cougars lost and no other Big 12 teams are left. But let's just project out our Final Four projections. Who did you guys have left from your last predictions, and who do you think will win it out now that our Cougars are out? Tom, you want to go first?
My Final Four was chalk. I had U of H going up against, I can't remember who's the 1 seed on the other one, Purdue, right?
Purdue, yeah.
And then I had UConn going up against, who was the other 1 seed? Was it UNC?
Yeah, UNC. Yes.
Yeah, and then I had UConn, U of H playing in the final game, and U of H winning it all. Now with it revised, I would have, NC State plays Purdue. I kind of wanted NC State to win, but I think Purdue's going to end up winning. UConn versus who are they playing?
Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I think UConn's going to win that game, and I think it's going to be a UConn-Purdue final. And I think, hard to say his name, I can't get it out of my mouth, Danny Hurley's going to win another one. I hate saying it.
Yeah, I know how you feel. How about you, Bill?
Well, I think this is going to end up being very redundant, probably for all 3 of us. Yeah. But I had UConn, I had Arizona, I had Creighton, and I had us, and then I had us beating UConn. This was I do really well in brackets about 1 out of every 7 years at best. I overthink it. I make terrible picks, and this year was no different. In my office pool, I think I pretty well sealed dead last.
Yeah.
So, take everything I say for what it's worth. And I'm going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
I think Purdue beats NC State. I think Alabama could keep the game reasonably close against UConn because they've got so many offensive weapons, but unfortunately, Alabama plays next to no defense, and I don't think UConn's going to go on a 30-0 run against Alabama like they did against Illinois. I think it's going to be UConn over Purdue.
Yeah. I mean, from my March Madness brackets, I didn't hit a single Final Four team. I had ISU, North Carolina, Houston, and Creighton. So I'm 0 for 4, man. And I'll tell you, in brackets, I usually do reasonably well. I'll probably win money every other year. But this is one of those years that I did not even come close. And I'm with you guys. I think it's going to be a UConn-Purdue final. And I think UConn's going to pull it out because this may be a generational UConn team. They're good. No doubt about it. And they've been upping their game in the tournament as well. So as much as I hate Hurley, their team is pretty freaking amazing.
They're good, but I don't think they're as good as everyone thinks. And I would have loved to have seen us play them.
Me too. I would have loved it.
They won a blowout in their 116 game. They beat Northwestern, who's not athletic. They beat San Diego State by 17. San Diego State wasn't as good as they were last year when UConn beat them by 17. And then, the Illinois game was tied at 23 before the 30-0 run.
But there was
I think run. Yes, you're absolutely right. And they won big.
Yeah.
But Illinois just, they offensively, they fell off the map, and B, UConn was just scoring at will. I think a good team that plays well on both ends of the floor can compete with UConn and beat UConn. And unfortunately, like I said, we're not there.
Yeah, I think all of us would have. We would have liked a shot at them. But next year is going to be the year, I'm convinced. So that's it for this episode 24 of the No Conference for Old Men podcast. Hope you all enjoyed it. And again, would really appreciate it if folks would follow, subscribe, or collect our podcast, depending on your podcast platform of choice. We are also available via the Republic of Football podcast feed from the folks at Dave Campbell's Texas Football as the only basketball-centric podcast. We're at the GoCoogs.com website for those that prefer to digest the content that way. We appreciate the continued support from all. Also, please give us a follow on our Twitter account, No Conference for Old Men. Thank you all again for listening. And again, now that it's officially the off season for our Hoops program, we'll begin our monthly cadence with some ad hoc episodes should there be any breaking news from the program or transfer portal perspective. So please be on the lookout to download and listen as the episodes drop. Take care, everyone.